My name is Stephen. I'm a communicator here at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, and it is my privilege this morning to introduce to you Astronaut Al Worden. Colonel Worden was born in Jackson, Michigan. He holds engineering degrees from the University of Michigan and the United States Military Academies. Thank you very much for your service to this country. He attended Empire Test Pilot School in Farnborough, England. He served as an instructor pilot at the Advanced Aerospace Research Pilot School at Edwards Air Force Base in Southern California. He has logged 4,000 hours of flight time. He joined NASA in 1966. He served on the support crew for Apollo 9. He was on the backup crew for Apollo 12, and he went to the moon as the command module pilot on Apollo 15. He orbited the moon 75 times. He performed the first comprehensive scientific and photographic survey of the moon from lunar orbit, and he also performed the first deep space spacewalk. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce to you Astronaut Al Worden.
Thanks, Steve. Morning. Morning. How's everybody? Cheers. Can we cheers with coffee? Why not? Why not? I gotta keep my heart going. I'm getting to the point where the first thing in the morning I gotta have a cup of coffee to get my heart started. Anyway, welcome to Kennedy Space Center. How many have been here before? Anybody? Oh, we've got quite a few. Oh, you know what you're looking forward to then. Okay, you guys can cover your ears. I'll talk to everybody else. Kennedy Space Center is one of the world's unique places. This is where every single human has been launched into space from the U.S. Every one of them, over 400 of them now. Launch complexes 39A and 39B were the ones that we used back in the day. Before that, Mercury and Gemini launched a little bit further south. But 39A and 39B were where the huge rockets launched, including all the Apollo program launches and the shuttle launches. 39A today is being used by SpaceX. And I'm sure everybody is familiar with SpaceX these days. Anybody see the launch last Friday morning? Oh, you did, okay. Wasn't that spectacular? They had a magnificent launch, but the most important part of it was they recovered the booster back here on ground, and we could see it coming down. It was just amazing. In January, they're going to launch one that's 3 times as large. They're launching what they call the Falcon 9 Heavy. And what they're going to do is they're going to strap 3 Falcon 9s together and launch it. All 3 of those boosters are going to come back and land on separate launch paths, on separate paths, recovery paths. 2 of them on the ground here over in the southeast corner of Cape Canaveral, and the center core is going to land out on the barge. It's going to be absolutely spectacular if they can pull that one off. I just can't believe 3 of those things coming back down at the same time and landing successfully. But I think they can do it. SpaceX is pretty good. We've got about 140,000 acres here. It's been government property for a long, long time. Most of it is in natural wildlife habitat, if you will. There's a very large contingent of national wildlife people that monitor the herds here. I call them herds because there's some pretty big numbers. Last time I heard there were over 5,000 alligators that live here as an example. There are probably tens of thousands of snakes. I can handle alligators, but snakes I don't know about. We also have a healthy population of eagles that live here. So there are lots and lots of wild animals that live here in that huge acreage out to the northwest of all the launch complex. And I think it's kind of a neat thing where we're launching people into space on one side and we're growing herds of wild animals on the other side. That's kind of a neat combination, I think. Why do we launch from the east coast of Florida? Well, that's a very simple reason. We launch to the east because we take advantage of the Earth's rotation. Now, I'll give you a little problem to think about. If I put you on the equator in one spot and you stood there for 24 hours, how far would you travel? Anybody know? All the way around, 24,000 miles in 24 hours. So if you stand in one spot on the equator, you are essentially traveling at 1,000 miles an hour to the east. And we're we're up here at 27 degrees, so it's not 1,000. It's probably 700. But what that means is if we launch to the east, then we can put on less fuel to get there, or we can put on a bigger payload or whatever we need to do to use up that 700 mile per hour margin that we have up here. So that helps us get bigger payloads into orbit than when we launch from here. You can't do it from the West Coast, because then you got to make up that 700 miles an hour plus another 7. You got to make up 1,400 miles an hour if you're going to launch from the West Coast. That's why Vandenberg, they launch mostly polar orbit stuff, because they don't launch to the west. It's too expensive in terms of fuel. Apollo 15 was the 4th manned lunar landing mission. We were a rather scientific mission. We carried the first little lunar rover. They gave Dave Scott and Jim Irwin a lot of extra mobility on the lunar surface. They could go quite a long ways away from the lunar module. And we carried a pretty extensive scientific package into the lunar orbit that I operated through the 6 days that I was there, photographing the moon's surface and remotely sensing the surface, doing a lot of photography, a lot of visual observations. We were very highly trained geologists. That reminds me, what do we call the study of rocks here on Earth? Geology, right? What do we call the study of rocks on the moon? Anybody hazard a guess? We call it geology. Kind of silly, isn't it? I wonder what we're going to call the study of rocks when we get to Mars. Probably going to be geology. It should be Marsology or something like that. Anyway, we were very well trained in all the geology. I did the large stuff. I kind of described craters and that sort of thing, and Dave and Jim went down to the surface and they picked up rocks so that we had the small comparison stuff. Dave Scott on the left was our commander. He'd flown on Gemini 8 with Neil Armstrong and on Apollo 9. So he was the seasoned guy. He was the captain of the ship, the director of the flight. And his job was to fly the lunar module down to the surface and then back up again when they were finished. Jim Irwin on the right was this lunar module pilot. Lunar module pilots don't fly anything. They're along for the ride. They basically check out and look after all the systems to make sure everything is okay, and look over the shoulder of the guy who's actually doing the flying, but they don't get a chance to fly anything. I was a command module pilot, which meant that I flew everybody out from the Earth into lunar orbit. I got them off down to the surface while I was there for 3 days by myself, and then I picked them up. We spent another day, and then I flew them back home. So I got most of the flying time, the actual flying time on the flight. People ask all the time, wouldn't you rather have walked on the moon? And the answer is absolutely not. There was no, when I was in the program, we didn't have all this media stuff that goes on that focuses on the guys that walk on the moon. You know, it's kind of funny. There are 12 guys that walk on the moon and they make a big issue of that, but there's a much more select group, if you will, of 6 of us who flew orbit around the moon. So we're a much smaller group than the guys who actually walked on the moon. But back in the day, if you wanted to be a commander on a flight, and you wanted to actually make the landing like Dave Scott did, your best shot was to be a command module pilot first, because you now know all there is to know about the command service module and how to fly it. And all you have to learn then is how to fly the lunar module. If you're a lunar module pilot, let's say on your flight, like Jim Irwin was, you don't fly either vehicle. You're not a pilot on either one. So that means you got to learn 2 machines to become a commander. The only one in that program who did that was Gene Cernan on Apollo 17. And he was very fortunate that he got that job. There were some pressures that put him in that job. We all sort of felt like Dick Gordon should be the guy. He was a command module pilot on Apollo 12. But from above in Washington, the word came down and Gene got the job, and it did a really, really good job too. So that turned out just fine. The suits we have on are full pressure suits. You cannot survive in a vacuum. So you have to have pressure on the body so that the lungs can exchange oxygen with the blood into the bloodstream. That won't happen if you don't have pressure on the lungs. So we have to wear these suits when we're exposed to a vacuum. The pressure inside the suit is 5 pounds per square inch. These suits are made by International Latex Corporation up in Dover, Delaware. You ladies will probably know, I'm sure you know who that is. For you guys, I'll just tell you what their primary product is. International Latex Corporation makes girdles. They make foundation garments. I never quite figured out the connection between foundation garments and spacesuits, but they got the contract and they did a really nice job. And we had these suits tailored to us. Went there a number of times to get it fitted and make sure that the elbow was in the right place and all the right stuff was in where it's supposed to be. These suits weigh 90 pounds. They cost $250,000 back then. They were pretty expensive. That amounts to about $2 million a piece today, by the way, if you were to take into account the value of money. As I say, we each had two. I kept one in the closet so that when the photographer was around, I had a clean suit to wear. And the other suit got kind of gray along the line because that's one we used for all of our training. But we wore Sunday go-to-meeting suit on launch day so that we at least started out clean. We had the ability, if you will, the prerogative of naming our spacecraft and picking our own crew patch. Naming the spacecraft, we named the lunar module the Falcon because that's the mascot of the Air Force Academy. And we were all 3 Air Force guys. We had all graduated from the military academy. Dave and I graduated from West Point and Jim graduated from Annapolis. But we all graduated before there was an Air Force Academy. And back in those days, 1/3 of the class in both of the academies, at West Point and Annapolis, went into the Air Force so that all 3 branches got the same number of students, or got the same number of graduates. So we all went in the Air Force, and we support the Air Force Academy, so we named the Falcon, we named the lunar module the Falcon. We didn't know what to name the command module, but I had a geology instructor that was training me, and he lived up in Washington at the time. His name was Farouk El-Baz. He's an Egyptian geologist, wonderful guy. He is now an archivist at Boston College in the remote sensing department, but absolutely fabulous guy. He came down through what used to be called Washington National. I think it's called Reagan now, something like that. And he picked up a book on old explorers. And we went through the book and found a section in there dedicated to Sir Francis Cook, the Captain Cook, who sailed the Endeavour to the South Pacific back in the 1700s on the first scientific voyage to the South Pacific. Well, that sounded just like our cup of tea because we figured we were going on the first scientific mission to the moon, and so we named the command module Endeavour. And it's the English spelling with a V-O-U-R. The crew patch is a little different. We had lots of designs submitted to us. We weren't sure that we liked any of them. So we got a friend of a friend to help us with the crew patch. The friend of a friend was an Italian dress designer. His name was Emilio Pucci, and Pucci was quite famous years ago for his dresses. It was all in silk, all pastel colors, swirly pastel colors, very fruity and all that kind of stuff. Well, Emilio came over to this country when he was a young man and went to college here. And he went to the University of Georgia, and he got a degree in agricultural engineering, whatever that means, I'm not quite sure, but he got a degree in agricultural engineering. He went back to Italy. He liked to fly, so he became a pilot, and he was a fighter pilot, flew through World War II as a fighter pilot for the Italian Air Force. And I guess after the war, he did what all Italian fighter pilots wanted to do. He got into ladies' clothes. And he was rather successful at it. He submitted a little plan to us, which was rectangular with little fluted corners, and it was all in greens and purples and blues and violets and all that kind of stuff. But what we picked up on it was the 3 birds, 3 stylized birds flying over the surface. We made it circular, red, white, and blue. There's a picture of our landing site in front of the birds. A little secret that I like to tell people about, because I think the statute of limitations has now expired, is that we were told we couldn't put Roman numerals on our patch. Well, if you look, let me see if we got this thing going.